we need to have a discussion on what tradition actually is and why it might not mean what you think it means. You see, tradition, just as a word, right? It means something has been handed down or passed down. That's all, right? It just means that something has been given to somebody else. There is no requirement in tradition that it be the same from generation to generation. All it means is that thing needs to be passed down. In fact, what we see when we look at the martial arts, the tradition of martial arts is every generation adds and removes things from the next one. They still pass on the overall framework, they pass on the ethos of the martial art, but they add and remove and change things according to their experience and understanding. So when we say something is a traditional martial art, really all we are saying is that something has a lineage. It wasn't just created yesterday. It's just kind of another way of saying an old style. Something that I heard from Mark McYoung, and I believe he said he got it from someone else, but I don't know who, is that, some people like to make the differentiation between traditional and classical. And the sense of traditional in this definition then is that the traditional is more like the snapshot of we are passing down so-and-so's martial art, right? So in my case, we are passing down Ip Man's Wing Chun. Okay, except that Ip Man's Wing Chun is doesn't exist anymore because every single one of his students changed it and passed down something different. And you can look at every single lineage from the known students, both living and dead, and you will see quite noticeable significant differences between the styles. So does Ip Man's Wing Chun still exist? Is it still a traditional martial art? You could argue no, but that's the concept of tradition in this definition that McYoung was passing on, is the idea that is kind of you are taking something from a root point and you're trying to preserve it and pass it on. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with preserving the old methods. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with passing something on unchanged. But that's kind of not the point of tradition. Now, if we're going to take the idea of classical, well, classical really just means kind of something it means kind of something of a high caliber. What it's really referring to is comparing something to something of a standard, something that is esteemed as being of very high quality or the highest quality even. And so the idea of a classical martial art is basically saying what was the intent, the purpose, the ideal of this martial art? Are we practicing the classical ethos? Are we practicing the classical style of this martial art, or are we practicing the tradition of this martial art? And there's a lot of overlap there, but for some people that may be a useful definition. Now, like I said, I don't necessarily think that tradition mandates that things get passed on unchanged. We can see that time and time and time again. Things that are considered traditional do not get passed on unchanged. Things get removed, things get added, things get, laterally altered, and we see things change all the time in tradition. The biggest idea behind something being traditional is that you're still trying to preserve the overall framework and ethos of the thing, well, assuming it's a system or something like that, in our case being martial arts. A traditional system is you're just going to be trying to preserve, what was the framework? Why was it created? What is it trying to do? Are we preserving some historical things for the sake of keeping our roots? Yes. Are we allowing it to change and evolve with time? Yes. Both are possible at the same time. Traditional does not mean something is rigid and unchanging. It does not mean that at all. It simply means that you are honoring those that came before you as having something. Now, we do have a problem in the traditional world, and that is that a lot of people think that because something is old and has withstood the test of time, that it was somehow kind of like a golden nugget of infallible truth, and that's not true. Anybody who's been around martial arts, anybody who's actually fought, understands that the technique that works for this guy may not work for this guy, right? There's a whole host of factors that go into what makes a technique work or not. And so when we look at a martial arts system, whatever we're calling traditional or classical or whatever, what we're actually looking at there, then is the concept of, right, what is that art trying to do, right? What was the context it was created for? Where did it come from? Who created it? Are there pieces there that we should be aware of, right? I am a big fan of relating things to, traditional martial arts, to the idea of like a change log in a computer program. Now, I'm not a coder. I don't know much about that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I do know about the coding world is that there are change logs. And the idea of a change log is that you can see the version history and what was done and what was updated, what changes were made, what bug fixes were done, but it's preserved. I think that's how martial arts need to work. I think you need to, in a sense, kind of free the code. Look, you have to have that matrix vision like Neo in the Matrix. You have to be able to look at the code, right? Are you actually changing the framework of the program? Are you changing the coding language? No. What you're doing is you are making adjustments to make the program actually run smoother, make it more user-friendly, make it actually better at what it does. That's what it's trying to do. And so something being traditional, really honestly, it's almost a meaningless term at this point. So when we're saying we're doing traditional martial arts, we're really just saying we're doing something with a lineage. It doesn't mean that it's unchanged. And in fact, it is certainly not unchanged. Every single one of these arts that we call traditional does not change hands without features of it being changed. So we have to get past this idea that traditional martial arts are stuck in the past. Some teachers might be stuck in the past. Some teachers might be trying to preserve a historical modality. That's fine, right? My involvement in the HEMA community. HEMA is not trying to synthesize new and better swordsmanship. They're trying to rediscover the old swordsmanship that has been lost because warfare changed, things fell out of style, and all we have left are a few treatises, manuals, and some memoirs to go by. Well, hey, you know what? They're doing the best they can with what they got. And I'll tell you what, they've produced some pretty damn good swordsmen studying arts that don't have a living lineage. But does that mean all of us have to do it that way? Well, no, right? Now, yeah, you take the historical out of it if you try to start synthesizing new stuff. And maybe you should exhaust those opportunities before you start synthesizing new stuff. But the fact is that some of us are interested in the weapon craft, even though it is archaic, because it can teach us something or because it's interesting. I mean, it's a point of curiosity, right? And so perhaps we just look at something like that and we go, well, let's take the manual, test a few things out, go spar with it for a little bit. It's an important part. Let's go spar with it for a little bit, right? Take some notes, go back to the drawing board and do it again. That's how HEMA has worked. And the fact is that's how most martial arts have worked. Because if you go back far enough in any lineage, eventually somebody was just making stuff up. They got into fights, they got some experience, they theorized a few things, they tried them out. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. The stuff that worked, they kept. That's just kind of how this stuff goes. Now, it is a problem when a teacher adds or removes stuff without testing first. Because then it's done, negligently or in ignorance, and that's a problem. That is certainly a problem, but it's not always that way. So we got to be careful when we talk about tradition. We have to be a little more honest about what tradition means, and more important than that, because people mean different things when they speak, you got to be willing to define what you mean when you say traditional. And if somebody else is not operating by that definition, you don't get to tell them they're wrong. Anyway, that's all I got for you now. And I will talk to you guys again later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, give the dog a bone. You can follow us on our other social media accounts. And if you really like us, you can head over to Amazon and buy a shirt. You can also go over to Gumroad and purchase some of our instructional courses. All of the links will be provided and also on our website. If you happen to be in the Phoenix area, we would love to meet you. Come drop in for a class, even just to chat. And if you're looking for a new home, we would be happy to have you. So until next time, good journey.